The third week of Overwatch League action is almost upon us, and this upcoming weekend promises to be a very exciting one, as for the first time this year, we finally get to see the Apac teams play their first matches on Overwatch 2. This means that we'll be able to see what sorts of strategies and compositions the East region teams are running, which could prove quite interesting and insightful, given the Apac region has in the past often had a different read on the meta compared to NA. Just like a couple of weeks ago, however, this also means that when it comes to these predictions, we don't have any real evidence to go on, so I suspect that many of the results from these series that I'm about to predict may end up being wrong. But without any further delay, let's get straight into my first Apac predictions of the year, before returning to the NA scene a little later on in the video. Friday begins with a very interesting contest between our defending champions, the Shanghai Dragons, and a somewhat rebuilt Philadelphia Fusion. On paper, it's hard to go against Shanghai here, as they haven't appeared to downgrade at all during the off-season from last year, and their already deep roster looks brilliantly equipped to transition successfully into Overwatch 2. That's why the Dragons were my pre-season favourites, and I expect them to continue their impressive form and dominance from 2021, which is why I'm going with a 3-1 win here, but I'm certainly not writing off the Fusion in 2022. The off-season for Philly was obviously a very difficult one, following the tragic passing of Alan, but whilst there's a lot of unknowns with this team, I would say generally I'm quite positive. Anyone who's watched the channel for a while will know how highly I rate Fury, and based upon what we've seen from the NA region so far, off-tanks particularly appear to have adapted quite well to the one-tank shift in Overwatch 2, and so I think this change will suit him brilliantly, given the quality and flexibility he's demonstrated in previous seasons. Philly have also employed a similar strategy to the Shock in terms of recruiting a few rookies from their contenders-tied organisation, T1, with Zest and MN3 hopefully making impressive debuts to take some of the pressure off of Carpe on the DPS line. If there's one area of concern, it's perhaps their support line, but I'm hoping they play solidly. Of course, we won't know whether these estimations are true or not until we actually see them play, and that's why I'm not going to predict the Fusion to be an incredible team out the gate, especially as they're facing the defending champions in their season debut. Following this series is quite an intriguing contest between the Guangzhou Charge and the Valiant, which could give us an early indication as to which team will rank as the weakest in the East region this season. Neither side as a complete package fills me with much confidence, although I do like some of the pieces on each team. For instance, Eileen, Krong and Molly for the Charge, whilst I'm personally also hyped to see what Dia can do on the Valiant. I guess the main question is whether the Book of No-Hill is something I truly want to believe in, with the No-Hill season stand certainly trying to get me to lean that way. This really does feel like a coin flip, but at the end of the day I'm going to go with the Guangzhou Charge here, as although I don't think they're fantastic, at least I do have a rough idea in my mind of their overall level of play, whereas with the Valiant I haven't got a clue, and the fact they have 5 DPS players on their roster isn't something that fills me with the greatest level of confidence. But hey, maybe I'll be proved wrong. Ending Friday in Apac is a series that I'm personally dreading the most, the Hangzhou Spark against the Seoul Dynasty. I found it very interesting to see that most people appear to be predicting this series as a relatively comfortable one for Seoul, but I think that's discrediting the Spark a bit. Now I know that Hangzhou historically are a team that cannot be trusted, and their coaching staff also raises some questions, but looking at their veteran players, they have Shai, Architect, Gushui, Bernard, mixed in with rookies from their strong contenders team Bilibili Gaming, so I think there's a team here with a ton of potential, especially if those rookies hit the ground running like we've seen by many of the debutants in NA. This is why I'm thinking this might be quite a close series, a fort that only gets stronger when you consider the unreliability that has been Seoul in the Overwatch League. At a glance, the Dynasty have a great roster. The DPS line is stacked, Smurf is a brilliant tank player, and although the support line has been touted as a potential weakness, Creative has a fantastic Ana, and Vindame joins the side having enjoyed a very successful year in contenders last year with O2 Blast. I just can't believe in them fully though until we see them play. We need to see how Toby does as a head coach, and given the rise in Zarya priority, I worry about how Smurf might perform as the only tank, although this could be remedied by swapping in a DPS. That's why, although I'm giving the Dynasty the win, I'm only saying they scrape through here 3-2. As for Saturday, the day starts with the debut of the final Apac team, the Chengdu Hunters, a squad that carries the greatest unknowns of all, given the recent chaos surrounding the org and player releases. Looking at their roster as it heads into this week, there are still some very strong pieces, notably the OWL MVP Leaf on the DPS line, as well as Garga at tank and Monk on support. Given they've kept their core players, I don't see them falling apart or anything like that, but the losses of Farway and Aprita to a minimal extent, but most importantly Rui do feel very significant, as whenever the Hunters haven't had Rui, their form and approach from a coaching point of view has seemed to dip a bit. Against a team like the Charge, who I don't think look that great, I think they should still end up winning. The real question though is how they fare against the top 2 or 3 teams in the East this year, and that's where I'm not so confident. Looking at the rest of the matches, I don't want to go into too much detail, as honestly we just don't know what will happen. But in line with my preseason power rankings, I've got Shanghai and Seoul winning 3-1 against the Spark and Valiant respectively to end Saturday. And to conclude Apac's first week of action, I've got Philly defeating the Charge 3-1, before two 5-map series, with the Dynasty triumphing over the Hunters, before the Spark just edged past the Valiant. But who knows? Now shifting our attention towards NA, I'm afraid to say that on balance, at least for me, this week looks comparatively less competitive, with a lot of the top teams facing seemingly weaker opponents, although there are a couple of matches we should definitely be keeping our eyes on. Unless there's a drastic overturn in performance from last week, I reckon this could be yet another difficult week for Paris. And coming up first against a Washington side galvanised by an impressive sweep of Atlanta from last weekend, it's hard for me to predict anything other than a 3-0 sweep for the Justice here. The second series on Friday between Florida and New York I'm not sure will be that close, as I'm predicting a 3-1 Florida win. But depending upon the result, it could for the most part confirm where these teams are ranked in the West Region power rankings. So far the Mayhem look to be in the middle of the pack, causing some problems for the teams just above them, whilst comfortably dealing with those below them. Whereas New York seem firmly confined to only realistically fight for wins against the bottom 4 or 5 sides. A close series from the Excelsior here, or indeed a win, would earn them a lot more respect, and perhaps put the brakes on Florida's momentum, as well as the arguments by some that I've seen that they are trending towards being realistic challengers amongst the teams outside the top 3. The Dallas vs Toronto match to end the day is another that could end up being better than I'm expecting, but results from last week have me a lot higher on the field and a little lower on Toronto. The Defiance win over Houston in Week 1 looks a lot worse now after Week 2, so this series is a chance for them to show that they are a side that is capable against teams at the very top of the West region, but I'm not convinced. Should Dallas play the way they did against Washington, or in the second half of the series against Gladiators, then it should be a simple enough task. But they've yet to string together 2 back-to-back good performances, so I guess there's a potential opportunity Toronto could exploit here if the Fuel struggle at the start of the series again. This leads us into the first 2/3 of Saturday, which is where I think we see 2 of the best West region matchups of this weekend. Firstly, with the London Spitfire taking on the Houston Outlaws. This match actually has a lot riding on it, as a win here for London could finally legitimise the success they've had to start this season, as so far their wins have only come against 2 of the worst teams in NA. It could also prove that their Rhine Rush comps are actually valid setups that can work even against sides in the middle of the pack. For Houston meanwhile, a win here is greatly needed to claw back some of the momentum they lost in Week 2. With it also being an opportunity for the Outlaws to successfully double down on their Doom comps or make some progress with a shift in style and philosophy. This series could also determine spots for the kick-off Clash tournament, so I expect both teams to be giving it their all here. Right now though, I'm still not buying the Haddy and London stonks, which is why I'm backing Houston here. Afterwards though is my most anticipated match of the weekend, as the San Francisco Shock take on the LA Gladiators, 2 of the best teams we have in North America going head to head. For the past couple of weeks, I've explained that right now, I believe the Shock to be the best team in the West, but this week provides their toughest test yet, with San Francisco facing a team that went to 5 maps, but arguably should have beaten Dallas, a team that most people recognise as one of the top 2 or 3 sides in the West region. If the Shock win here, it should confirm all the success they've had so far, and given the form of players like Proper and Finn, in my opinion 2 of the best performers from the NA region so far, I reckon they'll get the job done here as well, even if it will be in a very competitive showing. That's not at all to discredit the Gladiators, mind you, as I think they have the potential to be one of, if not the best side in the West region at some point this season. Uns and Kevster are an imposing force on the DPS line, Reiner has impressed me so far, deputising as a solo tank, while Shu has carried forward his upward momentum and top level displays from last year. Unlike the Shock though, there are certainly more question marks here, which is why I think they may come up short. In every Gladiators series so far, there have been moments where they get a bit disjointed, which although they got away with against weaker opponents, they were punished heavily for in their reverse sweep defeat to Dallas. There are also some concerns regarding Patipan's form, but I'd rather actually focus on Funny Astro, who hasn't utilised his ultimates that well in key moments, which especially against the Fuel was capitalised upon. If the Gladiators play to their full potential, I don't doubt for a second that they could overcome the Shock on Saturday, particularly if you consider the greater depth of experience on their roster, which if they push San Francisco to 5 maps, may just give them the edge due to the pressure that would be on the rookies of the Shock for the first time. But LA haven't been able to produce over an entire series thus far this season, and that's why I couldn't back them to win here. Saturday ends in what could be a whimper, as unless Boston rectify their issues from last week, I don't foresee Toronto not coming away with a comfortable win. Then on Sunday, I fear we could be in for some drubbings, as I would be amazed if Vancouver, Paris or Boston were competitive in any of these series against what appear to have been some of the strongest teams in NA so far, in Atlanta, Dallas and Washington. Ultimately, I could have even predicted all of these matches to finish 3-0, but the Uprising have seemed to show an ability to squeak out the odd map win here or there. So bearing in mind that I'm still not fully sold on the Justice, I've gone with a 3-1 scoreline here to spice things up. On that note though, that's where I'm going to leave it today with my predictions. So now I want to hear what you're all predicting down in the comments below. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. But until next time, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.